Representative Dubitsky.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate it. And I appreciate this debate, and I just wish this were more of an academic debate as opposed to a debate on the floor of the House of Representatives here that we're actually considering this. When I come to work here at the legislature, every single time I've got in my suit pocket a copy of the U.S. Constitution. And today I was actually preparing to discuss this bill and noticed when I put on my suit that I actually had 2 copies with me, one in each breast pocket. So for those of you who actually are interested in reading it, I've got an extra copy of the Constitution right here. Article 2 is what we really want to start looking at. Now, Article 2 encompasses the Electoral College. And the Electoral College, when I look at the Constitution and I think about the Electoral College, I actually think about the giants that created it, and that the people who signed the Declaration of Independence and the people who signed the Constitution and drafted the Constitution, people from Connecticut. Got Samuel Huntington, Oliver Ellsworth, Roger Sherman, William Williams. They were some of the smartest people that have come through Connecticut politics. Samuel Huntington was one of the 4 signers of the Declaration of Independence. He's from Scotland, from my district. He's from one of my towns. And you think about when he was active in Connecticut politics, there was actually a war right here. It wasn't somewhere in the Middle East. It was right here in Connecticut. In fact, the War Office of the Revolutionary War is located also in my district, in the town of Lebanon. And through that building, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Samuel Huntington, the founders of our nation, were developing our nation right here in Connecticut, fighting a war to keep America, America, to develop a system where the people ruled. Samuel Huntington moved from Scotland to another one of my towns, Norwich. He was, like me, a farmer. He was, like me, a lawyer. He was, like me, a Connecticut state representative. Samuel Huntington was one of us. And he's from my district. So I feel like I am standing on the shoulders of giants, standing here in this chamber, trying to preserve what the founders of this nation created. Another one of our founders, Roger Sherman. Roger Sherman was from New Milford. And he worked on drafting the Constitution. And specifically, along with Oliver Ellsworth from Windsor, developed the concept of the Electoral College. 2 giants from Connecticut developed the concept of the Electoral College for the United States Constitution. Why? Why did Connecticut residents develop the concept of an electoral college to put into the United States Constitution. It was to protect the state of Connecticut. That was the intent. That was what the Electoral College was designed for. That's why it's in the United States Constitution. Not to protect Wyoming, not to protect Indiana, but to protect the state of Connecticut. Specifically, the Constitution and the Electoral College were designed to prevent the big states at the time, New York, Virginia, Massachusetts, from just rolling over the little states, which at the time were Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware. So when the Constitution was being developed and written, we had two giants from Connecticut working on how do we create a system where the big states won't just roll over the little states. And what they developed was a system that was different than the Connecticut system. In the Connecticut system, we have a House and a Senate. Each one has representation based on population. The districts overlap, House and Senate. They represent different numbers of people, different geographic areas, but they're both based on population. We do not have that in the federal system. We have a House of Representatives that's based on population. And we have a Senate where each state is allocated 2 senators. Now, why was that developed like that? Why is it in the Constitution that we have the same number of senators as Texas, that has 10 times the population of Connecticut? Why do we have 2 senators and they have 2 senators? Doesn't sound fair, does it? They should have 10 times more senators than we do, but they don't. California has 40 million people. We have 3.5 million people. We have the same number of senators as California. That's not fair, is it? They should have many, many more times the senators than we have. The reason we don't is because Oliver Ellsworth and Roger Sherman, 2 giants from Connecticut, developed a system to protect the state of Connecticut from mob rule, from bigger states, from, at the time, from New York, Virginia, and Massachusetts. That's why we have an electoral system. In the House of Representatives, we have 5 representatives. We have 5 districts based on population. If our population goes up, we get more. If our population goes down, we lose some. Pennsylvania and Illinois have 18 representatives. New York and Florida have 27. Texas has 36, and California has 53 representatives. We have 5. Yet we still have the exact same number of senators as they have. Because the system is designed where we have 2 bodies. One is based on population, one is equal by state. And what that gives us is it gives small states essentially an unfair advantage. It gives us one leg up because we are always going to be on the short end of the stick unless we have some way to overcome the fact that there are enormous states with enormous geography and enormous populations. Without that advantage that was created by Connecticut residents in the drafting of the Constitution, Connecticut would be completely irrelevant. We would be a suburb of New York. There would be no purpose to have a border in between Connecticut and New York. We would just, every time there was a new state came in, our influence would diminish. But because we have the same number of senators as every other state, we have the same voice as every other state. Now, Representative Lamar had indicated that this bill, the National Popular Vote, as it's called, is to ensure that every vote in Connecticut has the same weight as in Ohio, Minnesota, and Wyoming. This bill would not do that. In fact, this bill would greatly reduce the weight of the votes in Connecticut. Now, he also mentioned that the people in Wyoming have a greater voice than the people in Connecticut. Well, that's true to some extent, because Wyoming has 2 senators, just like Connecticut. And we have almost 3 times the population as Wyoming. But it's the same the other way around. We have more weight than Texas and California and Florida, because although they have more people, we have proportionally more senators. And you can see the Electoral College is designed to give us that additional weight. And another way you see it is, if you look in Article 2, you see what happens if there's a tie. If in the Electoral College there's a tie, well, who gets to decide who becomes president? It goes to the House of Representatives, right? But here's the key. It goes to the House of Representatives, but each state gets 1 vote. So we get the same weight in our vote as every other state. We get 1 vote, just like California, just like Texas, just like Florida. That shows that this system is specifically designed to give Connecticut more power, not less power. If you read the Federalist Papers, Federalist 10, Federalist 68, our founders wrote why they developed this system. And they developed it for this exact purpose, to prevent the big states from rolling over the small states. Now, there is up until fairly recently in our history, senators were chosen by state legislatures. We, as a state legislature, chose our senators for the first 150 some odd years of our nation's existence. In 1913, the U.S. Constitution was amended, and it was amended with the 17th Amendment, which provided for the people of the state to vote on senators, just like they did in the House of Representatives. Now, there are people that think that that was not a good amendment and that it should be undone, and there's a process for that. In the same way that the process played itself out and the people of this country said that the state legislatures should no longer choose the senators, they went through the process, they amended the Constitution, and now the people of Connecticut get to elect our senators. even with the popular election of senators within the state, we still have 2. We still have more senators per person than the bigger states. So for the people who are willing to give up our vote to other states, I ask you, are you willing to give up one of our senators? It's not fair that we have 2 and so does Texas. Shouldn't Texas have 10 times our senators? That would be fair. So which senator should we give up? Blumenthal? Murphy? Give them to Texas. All the small states would do that. Let's give one of our senators to Texas. That's what we're doing with this vote. That's what we're doing with this bill. We're giving away the advantage that Oliver Ellsworth and Roger Sherman wrote into the United States Constitution specifically to protect the state of Connecticut. It doesn't make any sense. And we would be giving those votes to people that we don't even represent. We would be giving those votes to people in other states. Let me be political for a minute here. We're all in politics. We're elected officials. Let me be political. To those who are proposing this bill, I say to you, be careful what you wish for. Be careful what you wish for. You may just get it. Recently, in our history, the Democrats eliminated the filibuster for lower court judges, federal court judges. They did it because they thought they would be in power forever. And they thought by eliminating the filibuster when they were in power, they were going to prevent the Republicans from filibustering their judicial nominations. And what happened? What happened was the unexpected, and we now have a Republican president who has nominations to the Supreme Court. And that vote to eliminate the filibuster on lower court, on federal judges, came back to bite the former majority in the butt, big time. So be careful what you ask for. You may just get it. This national popular vote is a very, very sharp double-edged sword and can just as easily work against you as in your favor. I've also heard talk that candidates for president don't come to Connecticut. That we need to do something to attract candidates to Connecticut because we want candidates to come to Connecticut. We want presidential candidates to come here just like they come to New Hampshire and Iowa. Well, New Hampshire and Iowa aren't much different in size than Connecticut. Well, why do they go there and they don't come here? It has nothing to do with national popular vote. It has to do with primaries. Well, if we want presidential candidates to come here, why don't we address the primary system? Why don't we try to move our primary forward like New Hampshire and Iowa do? They get every single candidate for president goes to New Hampshire and Iowa. They don't come here. Has nothing to do with our electoral system. So there's no reason to destroy a system that has worked for over 200 years, that was developed by Connecticut residents specifically to protect the state of Connecticut, just to try to draw candidates here. We're looking at the completely wrong solution to this problem. And if anybody thinks for a second that presidential candidates who are now ignoring the state of Connecticut when we have 7 electoral votes, just imagine how they will ignore us when we have 0. Because that's what we'd be doing. We would have 0 electoral votes. All of our electoral votes would be given to Texas and California and Florida. And whoever they vote for, our votes would automatically go to them. So who would ever want to come to Connecticut? They would go to where the big population is. They would go to the place that controlled the electoral votes. And if this bill passes, it will no longer be Connecticut controlling any electoral votes. We will have no say in it. Now there's a lot of talk. There's bills up in the legislature this year. There's bills and discussion and court cases all over the country about disenfranchising people. We're talking about same-day registration. We're talking about early voting. We're talking about bills to impose or prevent voter ID laws. And these discussions and these bills are intended to prevent people from being disenfranchised. They're intended to prevent people from having their vote stripped of them. They're intended to prevent keeping people away from the polls, because every vote counts. We want to make sure that everybody who is qualified to vote and wants to vote can get into the ballot box and cast their vote, because every vote counts. You know, I heard a few days ago, I don't even remember what the discussion is, but I heard somebody on that side of the aisle saying the following words: why would anybody want to make it harder to vote? I agree with that. Why would anybody want to make it harder to vote? Because it is our birthright as American citizens to get into that ballot box and fill out a ballot and have our voices heard when there's an election, there's a ballot question, when there is a choice between 2 candidates. It's our birthright as American citizens. Whether we're born here or legally immigrate here, it doesn't matter. If we are allowed to vote, we should be able to vote. And our vote should count. This bill is the ultimate disenfranchiser. This bill is specifically designed to strip the people of this state of their vote. Now, all these other bills, they're designed to get somebody into the voting booth. They're designed to allow people to get in there and fill in the little box. That's great. But none of that matters. None of that matters at all if after they've filled in that vote, the vote is stripped from them. And that's what this bill does. This bill says no matter how you vote, no matter how the majority of the people of the state of Connecticut vote, the people in Texas get to decide how those votes are counted. That flies in the face of everything that Samuel Huntington and Roger Sherman and William Williams and Oliver Ellsworth fought so hard to enact into the United States Constitution. It also flies in the face of everything that I've heard about wanting to make sure that every vote counts and that everybody has access to the ballot.
system that still works for them.
So even if every single person in the state of Connecticut votes for the Democrat in the presidential election, every single person, we get all 3.5 million people in this state voting for the Democrat. If the majority of the people in the United States vote for Republican, then every one of you and every one of your constituents will also be forced to vote for that Republican. That's wrong. Now, I've worn this before, but for this debate, I wore my special necktie. This necktie has a list of all my towns. I represent 9 towns in this state: Chaplin, Hampton, Scotland, Lebanon, Lisbon, Canterbury, Sprague, Norwich, and Franklin. Some very historic towns, small towns, but they're proud towns. And they have people in those towns who are proud of their votes. You all represent towns too. Your ties may not have as many towns on them, but you represent people in your towns. Connecticut residents, people who live in this state, people who vote in this state, people who voted for you. I represent the people in my towns. I don't represent the people in Dallas, or Houston, or Amarillo, or in Bakersfield, California. I don't represent them. I represent the people in my towns, Connecticut residents. And I don't want to give the votes of the people that I represent to the people in other states that I don't represent. And I would hope that nobody in this chamber would want to do so either. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Representative.